Virginia doesn't set out to please everyone. Linear, obtuse, and extremely light on interaction, it doesn't hide the fact that it's presenting a more film-like experience to players. I mean, the new game option on the main menu is labeled Play Feature, and it has a chapter select screen that's identical to that of a movie's DVD release. If you're one of those people who doesn't like walking simulators or argues that they're not real games, this won't be for you. For the uninitiated, the term walking simulator typically refers to an extremely linear adventure game that offers few actual gameplay options and presents you with a story it wants to lead you through by the hand. Some of these games allow you to interact with items in the environment, but some go even further and only allow you to move through the world, listening to narration and not actively playing in any meaningful way. They've seen a boom in recent years, with releases like Gone Home and The Vanishing of Ethan Carter garnering a level of critical acclaim, but also some backlash. Some players argue that this is a watering down of the gaming medium, and that by limiting interaction, these titles are less worthy of being called a game. The debate surrounding games like this feels wholly overblown to me. A game's worth isn't measured in its level of interactivity, but rather how that interactivity makes you feel. The Witcher 3 is no more or less a game than Tetris, Gone Home no more or less than GTA 5. For the record, I'm not trying to say you can't have a preference for or against games like Virginia, but just that trying to classify them as anything other than games is extremely restrictive to the medium. With all that said, Virginia isn't perfect, even if you have an interest in games like this. So with that digression out of my system, let's actually talk about this game. Playing as Anne Tarver, a recent police academy graduate and newest member of the FBI, you're tasked with solving the case of a missing person in a small Virginian town. On top of that, your boss also wants you to investigate your own partner, a pariah within the Bureau with a mysterious past. As described earlier, this is a very linear adventure game with minimal input required from the player. The left stick moves you through the environment, the X button interacts. It's even more basic than it sounds, as more often than not there is one item in any given area that you can actually interact with, the item needed to advance the story. There's no hidden trinkets or alternate paths. You enter a space, you observe your surroundings for a bit, and you move on. So naturally, the story and presentation are going to carry this game. And even in this regard, Virginia makes some unusual choices that might divide audiences. The game is entirely dialogue free, no voiceover nor text-based communication. The game conveys its story via its beautiful, minimalistic art design, its gorgeous musical score, bizarre visual metaphors, and some unique cinematic techniques that aren't all that common in video games. Bucking the notion that walking simulators have nothing to contribute to the medium, Virginia has some tricks up its sleeves that regular games could learn from. It uses editing in a way I've never really experienced before in a game, not during cutscenes, but during actual gameplay. The scene will shift and you'll jump forward in time as the story dictates, and it's almost seamless. As an example, here's a scene from early in the game leading to the moment when you're first introduced to your partner. Through these simple hard cuts, the game conveys a passage of time while you travel through the bowels of the building to get to the office, which in turn tells us how excluded and isolated your partner is, all without taking control from the player. There are several moments like this that feel as though you're moving through a cinematic montage, and they keep you on your toes, giving the game a sense of pace and intrigue. So often we hear talk of cinematic qualities in games, but usually that's just shorthand for a decent story or good voice acting. Virginia melds concepts from cinema and gaming in ways I've never quite seen before, but could absolutely be implemented elsewhere. Late in the game, these montages get more complex and bizarre. The game takes a turn for the trippy, and the previously segregated dream sequences become interwoven with reality, making it hard to tell what's going on. I don't want to get into specifics for spoiler reasons, but the final act of the game is less about the whereabouts of Lucas Fairfax or the investigation of Maria Hallerpin, and more about Anne's perception of those two things, and the impact they've had on her life. As admirable an idea as it is, the game's lack of dialogue can start to hurt it on the home stretch, as some of these concepts are hard to convey without words. Similarly, the game's hallucinogenic imagery can make for interesting food for thought, but might also stick in your craw as obtuse and unsatisfying once the credits start to roll. Dream sequences and Anne's internal conflict are prevalent themes from the outset, and they present some interesting questions, but players may be frustrated by the lack of answers in the off-the-wall final act. Personally, I felt more than a little bewildered and wished there was a more concrete conclusion to the story laid out in the first half of the game. But nonetheless, the second half is memorable in its own ways, as Virginia's unmistakable sights and sounds burn themselves into your memory. I'm not much of a star rating guy, or a letter grade guy, or a marks out of 10 guy, so I guess I'll just wrap up with some concluding thoughts. Virginia won't convert genre naysayers, and it may even be too off the wall for genre fans looking for a thriller with a definitive ending. But while the whole package may not come together as smoothly as I would have liked, there's definitely enough individual parts that warrant your attention, and at just $9.99 for a 2-hour adventure, it's not too steep an investment. Your mileage will vary, but it's definitely one of the more unique trips you'll take in 2016.